the storm that pounded the periphery of. That evening, Seattle was one of the strongest lightning ripping in years. Raindrops smashing over the sky. In torrents, the majority of people were safely nestled inside, but Ethan Blake is a well-known emergency responder who his steadfast commitment was evident in it. He wasn't even expected to have a job. One of the teammates had called in sick, and Ethan had done so without hesitation. Offered to fill in for the late shift. That was the type of man he was, one who never takes shortcuts and takes his duties seriously, even without anyone looking. So when he passed as his patrol came to a conclusion, beside the abandoned storage facilities of the former, he didn't hurry across the freight yard path as most people would have his eyes. Remained vigilant while scanning out habit and principle, at which point he noticed it just a flickering activity close to a chain-link fence. He swung his flood and slowed the car. There is hardly any light in the area. A German came through the pouring rain. The dog, Shepherd, was drenched and covered with, tied to a bent metal post and covered in mud. Didn't growl or bark, it just stood there in silent protocol, terrified. Ethan was instructed to contact animal control and proceed, but it was almost 2 a.m. One would arrive until dawn, and something about that dog's posture, still observing in the storm despite resigning, refused to let him drive off. So he took a big breath, grabbed his coat, and went out into the chilly rain. Like needles, Ethan walked up to the chain clinked softly against the hound. The animal didn't, but the metal post did. He flinched and squatted down carefully, maintaining his calm. "Hey there, buddy," he said. Spoke softly, just over a whisper. "I'm not here to make you look foolish." Blassie, terrified but determined, met his. Ethan had already noticed that appearance, but not in animals, but in victims and survivors of human. The dog inched forward without retreating. Instead, it observed him as he considered his intentions. The chain had penetrated the dog's neck, exposing the flesh. Ethan's stomach constricted, raw and irritated. This animal had been left here by someone too. He was not abandoning it to suffer. He went back to the vehicle and took his emergency kit's bolt cutters with. With a sharp snap, the chain came loose, saying, "You're now free," he muttered without. The dog hesitated before letting Ethan wrapping his coat about its wet body and raising lightly against his truck's rear. Most stray animals would have refused to be barked at, perhaps a little afraid, yet this person trusted him. While he was driving through the rain, Ethan looked in the streets, heading home. The dog was curled up in the rearview mirror. The corner was shivering, but it was quiet. There's something unique about this animal, and intelligence, and he wasn't merely a veer off course. As he entered the driveway, Clara stood as the porch light flickered on, in her robe, standing at the door with a mug of. Behind her, Lily. She had a worried expression. Her eyes widened as she peered out. "Clara, inquire about the dog you brought home. Wouldn't have survived the night." "I'll get the med kit," Ethan said. Lily said, "I'll grab a blanket." Suddenly, the rescue operation had started. Claire laid out towels inside the house. On the floor of the kitchen, as Lily stood and the dog was carefully placed down. Close by, holding a fluffy blanket and observing with wide, worried eyes. Despite the late hour, Clara moved, entering the workforce after years of working part-time. When the veterinary technician arrived, she carefully inspected the dog, looking for visible wounds. When Lily gave her, provides gauze. "Lily, he is quite thin. Antiseptic water," muttered, lightly sweeping a palm across the wet back of the dog. Clara nodded. "He frowns because he hasn't eaten enough. Weeks or months, and the appearance of this wound. Someone shackled him about the neck like. This was intentional." The dog didn't fight back. Their touch, he remained motionless and vigilant, but quiet as dark eyes as he watched all they did. Yes, those eyes were in misery as you moved, but also a more profound understanding. "Does he have a name?" inquired Lily. Ethan shook his head, although I'm not sure why. After giving it some thinking, Lily grinned. "Well, may we gently call him Storm?" "We discovered him," repeating Storm. Ethan, observing the dog, it appeared to fit, following wound care and receiving. After drying him off, they constructed a bed out of old blankets. During the storm, in the living room. Really easily settled in, Lily, curled up with a book next to him, tiny hand softly resting on his paw. "Don't worry," she said in a whisper. "Sagging from sleep already will take good care of you." Clara and Ethan stood in, seeing the two Claras in the hallway. Her head rested on Ethan's shoulder. She stated, "She's already attached." Ethan said softly, "So am I." Something about the calm of that stormy night had moved a damaged dog and discovered. A damaged family finds purpose and safety, and neither was aware of the extent to which this. The following morning, the connection would be established, brought persistent precipitation and gloomy clouds. However, within the Blake residence, there was warmth from the heater as well as from Clara, something else that is less concrete, completed giving Storm a tiny amount of rice and boiling chicken as Lily sat close by, reading a book aloud about brave animals that unexpectedly Storm remained composed and didn't bark at all, only steady eyes that tracked, growling. Each motion as Clara delicately stroked. She pulled the matted hairs from around his neck. "Froze," she murmured gently. "Ethan." And he approached. "What is it?" "There's something," I said immediately. "Here." She cautiously leaned in closer, separating the hair under the scab surface. There were faint black numbers tattooed on the flesh. "A military code," said Storm, into his shoulder. Ethan's face tensed as Clara whispered. He yelled, "That's not a shelter ID." Picture and forwarded it to Naomi right away. Reyes, his lifelong companion and current federal detective with expertise in breaches and military security within 10. His phone buzzed after a few minutes, confirming the tattoo corresponds to a stolen military service. Fort Sutherland dog, vanished while being handled by hospitalization in Afghanistan. That Ghost was the name of the dog that Ethan examined. At the peacefully resting animal on the ground, licking Lily's hand. "We don't realize how much this dog has seen," Clara muttered. "He didn't simply make it through something." Ethan said, "He got away." Additionally, for the first time after Ethan brought him home and saw that Storm wasn't merely a rescue tale, marked the start of an inquiry by Ethan's living room at midday had changed into a temporary directive. Open the old case files on the center laptop, strewn around the maps of the dining table. Clara stood with colored TS pinned to her, her expression on the kitchen island growing darker as Ethan revealed what Naomi had. Storm was one of 12 ghosts that were discovered. Stolen military canines throughout the previous 18 months. Ethan clarified, the majority disappeared. 2 were discovered deceased without a trace. Following instances of unlawful fighting, Clara put down her tea. "You believe Storm was involved in?" "I believe that." Ethan grimly nodded. Storm lay before he had a chance to escape, ears perking up nearby, attentive but calm. At each strange noise his body made was still recovering. Yet his memories and thoughts was lively, and Ethan kept a close eye on him, observing minute variations in posture while his laptop made some noises. Faraway sirens and growling metal gates. Believe he is familiar with Ethan's whispered sighting. Perhaps somewhere that night, when Naomi arrived, she brought a stack of location logs and classified images that she spread them out on the ground before. "Let's see if anything sets off a Storm." As the pages turned, she responded. Storm was uninterested until a picture of a defunct processing facility appeared with his nose down and his body rigid. His throat released a low whine. "That location?" Ethan inquired, and the dorm made a step, went ahead, and sat next to the picture tail. Frozen, unyielding look, he remembers, Naomi whispered, and suddenly they had. 2 days after their initial genuine lead, a cooperative operation was in progress. Force had been put together using the lead Storm supplied the leftover meat. Processing facility just outside the city has been suspected for a long time, but never have sufficient proof for a warrant until the hurricane is still recuperating today, but grew more vigilant while riding at the rear of. Ethan's eyes and vehicle ears pricked up, looking around in silence. Intensity. He's not only performing. Ethan informed the chief officer that if something is amiss, he will be aware of the team, divided into groups, with each group being assigned to break through a separate entrance. Ethan and when the Storm hit the east side, The strategy was to enter, secure the location, and save any animals who were inside before suspects or evidence could be destroyed. May run away as they got closer. Storms. His body shifted, his nose clenched, sluggish, twitching steps a few feet away from. He stopped cold at the threshold and exhaled. His first act of aggression was a low growl. Since Ethan was saved, hold position, he ordered, freezing into the radio, followed a moment later by the bomb squad. Moving forward, lagging behind to examine what they discovered was altered. Everything, including multiple pressure plates. Explosives were set up at the eastern entryway is intended to explode. Storm had taken the first step inside, felt that the raid was happening right away. Entry points were diverted and modified. The structure was guarded with little. 6 dogs were found by risk inside officers, injured and imprisoned in a makeshift battle pit, and sufficient paperwork to establish a connection. The scheme to a local criminal. That evening, 17 people were arrested by Network 17. But more significantly, lives were spared. Animal and human following the suspects were removed. Ethan squatted next to Storm, who was now sipping peacefully from a "You just saved us all" bowl of water, he said, with a hand resting on the dog's. Storm's shoulder remained motionless, but his eyes, calm, focused, and completely present. Everything was silent when the news arrived. On Tuesday morning, a formal letter from Ethan is invited by the precinct and his family to be present at a unique occasion. They were honoring the courtyard storm. Clara read out loud the letter her voice caught at the breakfast table, somewhat when she got to the words in acknowledgement of valiant service and Lily's contribution to public safety. He's going to be a real one. His eyes glittered. Ethan, the police dog, grinned and brushed softly placed his hand over Storm's head. The previous week seemed like a dream. Reports, interviews, and follow-up. Investigations. The Storm had grown more. He was more than just a rescued dog. He was a component of something larger, and to Lily and Clara, who had breastfed him. During those initial delicate days, they had witnessed a very personal moment. He was broken, but they had seen him recover. At the precinct, they would witness him ascend. The stage had been built up in the courtyard with officers in uniform stood with silent dignity. News cameras were positioned in formation. Ethan appeared off to the side for once, Clara by his collared shirt, side wearing a lovely blue gown, and Lily, almost jumping in her shoes, clutching a hand-painted banner with pride that, when Storm read, "Storm, our hero," came forward in his freshly fitted Animal Crimes is embroidered on AK-9 vest. Task unit. The cheers came quickly, and the chief then stepped up to the platform and talked. Clearly, the Storm's voyage serves as a reminder that it is possible to teach resilience, but trust must be earned. Certainly, he was saved, but more crucially, he decided to assist, which makes the fact that he is more than a survivor. Clara, one of us, dabbed at a tear as Lily waved as she grabbed for Ethan's hand, angry with Storm, who appeared to notice. She gave her a tiny tail amid the crowd. Wag, following the family's commendation, asked to join the task force and chief. Members for pictures, Storm proudly sat, his position between Lily and Ethan, standing up, his eyes serene, aware, and in. At that time, they weren't just honoring a dog's metamorphosis, they were celebrating a fresh start for a dog's family and for each and every life they will be beneficial going forward. What began with a single family saving a damaged the dog had developed into something considerably bigger. Throughout the months after Storm's formal, Clara and Ethan found an appointment, placing themselves at the center of an expanding motion influenced by Storm's tale and the atrocities discovered throughout Clara offered a suggestion after conducting research that would quickly spread throughout the state. Numerous victims of domestic abuse remained in hazardous residences for longer than they ought not to, as they weren't prepared to depart. But since they were unable to leave, Storm's trip has created one of their creatures. It's obvious when there is animal abuse. Human misery is too common. Clara shared the concept with Ethan, and the two of them. They came up to the precinct carrying. Naomi supports a safe pause. Initiative began as a cooperative collaboration between the police and the veterinarian. The mission of local shelters and clinics was straightforward. It offered emergency housing and medical treatment for survivors' pets, enabling families to flee without leaving no one behind. The storm turned into the. He toured shelters as the program's face. Lily provided youngsters with consolation, who had seen horror and even provided assistance. Returned missing animals to their owners. While rehabilitation efforts are underway, the program, news outlets rapidly gained traction, took up the narrative that other cities had attained, out as well as on the anniversary of storms saving the initial commencement. The Safe Paws program ceremony was. 20 families were present at the community center. Each has a tale of survival through hardship, and a cherished pet came together to commemorate. Ethan stood next to Storm, symbolizing fresh starts, now a well-known person in the neighborhood. As Lily distributed little certificates, when a mayor was designing, she had assisted, concluded her address by saying, "This all began with a single act of kindness, and it never takes more than that." Clara, observing from the audience, grinned while. Once the storm subsided, the terrified stood tall. That night, among all of them, as the sun fell beneath the town and the skyline, Ethan sat quietly into the evening on a cup of coffee on his home's porch. His head was resting next to the dorm in his palm, watching with his eyes softly resting on his paws. The neighborhood, while appearing to be on duty, even though he was no longer in the military service and just hired to a distinct mission type and discipline, was constantly present and vigilant. Ethan looked down and grinned. "You've come a long way. You've come a long way, haven't you?" He recalled the trembling figure in the rain that night. In the dark, the snap judgment to halt. It might have been another shift. He may have adhered to the rules, reported it, driven on, and left it for morning, but something within him had made a decision to take action, and that decision had altered. Not only had everything in the dorm survived, but had recovered, changed, and guided them to justice, having rescued foreigners, lives, and united the community. Above all, he had reminded everyone of something straightforward but incredibly compassionate is not a sign of weakness, but rather of courage. One action set off a series of mending of the storm of hope for change. His head and lightly tapped Ethan's hand. Ethan chuckled softly as though in agreement. "Yeah, partner," he said, rubbing behind his ears. "You were aware of it the entire time." They sat there, man and dog, as the sky turned to stars, adjacent to one another, and in the silence of. At that point, Ethan realized what people have started to notice. Even the simplest act, generosity, can reverberate farther than we will. Do you know a year has gone by without the news? The news portions faded and went on, but inside a small house tucked away in the aftermath of a stormy night in the suburbs, still reverberated slowly and silently. Storm now worked with Ethan during the day, greetings on special investigations, school children during safety discussions, and snuggling up next to Lily every night while she read stories out loud. He didn't have any medals. Parade, merely a cozy bed, a household that cherished him and led a life of purpose. Occasionally, when new officers entered the precinct where the elderly would narrate not only the dog's story but of that instant, one individual decided to observe what others would have disregarded it, and the narrative concluded in the same manner that it began. A storm and a house was the result because, ultimately, more than just storm was saved.